Welcome back, y'all, to another episode 58 of the Spittin Hoops podcast. This is the live reaction or quick reaction podcast to the Karl Anthony Towns trade. Today, we had to bring in a specialist, a fanatic. Last year's season preview of the New York Knicks, Mark Steiner, our special guest for today. I'm just going to throw it to you off the bat. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling mixed. Mostly good about the trade, but definitely a little wary. And it's still it's now about a week since the trade happened, so most of my thoughts are still settled. But I'm gonna be honest, there might be a little bit of back and forth going on in this podcast. I'm not fully sure what to think about it.
Fair enough. I mean, pretty crazy trade, to be honest.
For a Friday
Unexpected.
night.
Yeah, unexpected, very much so. You know, you get home from a little night out, a little happy hour, and the trade news hits. And it's got a lot of implications across the Eastern Conference. Before I delve into it, as an Eastern Conference opponent, foe, title contender, defending title favorites, Anthony, how do you feel about this trade?
To your point, got reaction, was out with the fellas on a Friday night, heard the news, everybody started hopping on Twitter. Can you believe it? Can you believe it? My gut reaction was, oh my gosh. This is the best Knicks starting lineup that I've ever seen in my entire life. Yeah. Probably even better than the one in 99 where they went to the finals, but I don't know if we're going to count that one. I mean,
Where Ewing was hurt?
Where Ewing was hurt, exactly.
Oh, I was locked in for that one.
Yeah, exactly. Just kicking in the womb. But dude, Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, OG, Josh Hart, and Cat. This is a scary lineup. So, but we got a lot to talk about with this.
Yeah, I mean, let's get right into it. Friday night, we got the news. This is a 3-team trade, one that took a while to happen. There were some elements from Europe. You know, we got Dwayne Washington Jr., who's getting bought out of his European contract to make this trade happen. But the gist of it, the Knicks, they acquire Karl Anthony Towns, the draft rights to James Nagy via the Hornets, the 23rd overall pick this year, if I remember correctly. But the T-Wolves, they acquire Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo, Keita Bates-Diop, and a future first. This future first is a 2026 top 10 protected pick from the Houston, but if it does not convey, it's top 10 protected for 26 and 27 from Detroit. Sorry, not Houston.
Yeah.
And then after that, it becomes a second round pick. So we'll see if it conveys, but I mean, if the Pistons are out of the lottery in the next 2 years, that's an extra pick for the Timberwolves. But, you know, there's a lot to get to here. The Hornets, they're involved. They're a third team here who gets a bunch of second rounders. They get a bunch of guys via sign and trade. I'm a cap nerd, so I like that aspect. That's super interesting to me. We don't care about that right now. Let's delve right into it. Karl Anthony Towns gets the Knicks. That's the biggest story. This is a position of need for the Knicks, especially with Ihart leaving, Mitch Robinson hurt. Mitch Robinson had trade rumors all summer and still is. We'll get to that. Mark, how you feeling? You got potentially your second best player.
Yeah. And we gave up our second best player too. But I do feel a little better. Moments ago, Anthony kind of saying that he feels like this is a scary team. I mean, Anthony doesn't have the emotion that I have seeing one of my players go. So there's no bias. And I guess you want to make trades that make your in-conference rivals a little bit nervous. Overall, I mean, my first thoughts, this has been a guy they've wanted for a while. This is a guy who, him, Booker, and Donnie were the guys who just were the perpetual rinse and repeat Twitter trade rumors. He's got New York ties, New Jersey, close enough. And it's a big star. They had been saying for a while, under the Leon management, the trade for the big star was no longer the butt of the joke for the Knicks. Oh, one day they'll trade for a star. No, we are going to use our assets to make it happen. I thought it was Mikal. I thought we already did it. But I mean, it's a lot of shooting on that team. A lot of shooting.
It's a lot of shooting, and Julius Randle has always reminded me of a Kyrie Irving on the Celtics type of player where he was individually a very good player, But you saw it. Kyrie got injured for the Celtics in their postseason run. They made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. The Knicks, yeah, they got worn down, but they easily would have made the Eastern Conference Finals if they had been fully healthy without Randle there. So
Yeah.
I think this is a big plus. I'm also curious what you think about with Cat going back to his old coach who really taught him how to be a better player.
Yeah, I mean, I my history's right. I don't think they left on the best of terms
Yeah,
in
I kind of think
Minnesota.
I kind of think it's kind of iffy on that. That's one of the parts that worries
Yeah.
me is that like Towns was the person who didn't take the fall. It was Jimmy and Tibbs. They get fired slash leave the team within a year of each other, and Towns
Right.
and Wiggins are the ones who survive. And there's no chance. There's no and like there's definitely a
Right.
conversation that needs to happen there between those two. You know?
Yeah, they got some shit to smooth over. But I mean, the comments have all been good that they've actually had a relationship over the years and that both of them have grown to appreciate each other since
Yeah.
leaving.
Mhm.
I can't imagine that they would, in the media say, no, I actually really hate this guy. I hated working with him. Like that's the kind of stuff your agent tells you to say. But maybe it's true. I like Cat was a young guy at the time, and Jimmy has not, since leaving Minnesota, he's proved his basketball acumen, but he's also proved that he's not the easiest guy to work with. So, maybe that was just a whole clusterfuck, and in a much more functional environment, they'll get along better. But I definitely think that is it's also Towns is not a Tibbs kind of guy, like this is becoming a Tibbs kind of team in some ways, but like Towns is not a super physical bust your ass kind of guy to me. He's more of a, I guess, doesn't play defense as hard and is more of an offensive player.
It's not the classic Tibbs mold where he likes
No,
like a guy who's a hustle player, has intangibles, and then maybe we transform him into something better. That's
couldn't be
kind of
more
like
different than Josh Hart, for example.
yeah, or even Jimmy. I mean, Jimmy Butler,
Yeah,
Tibbs in Chicago, and then Minnesota.
yeah,
Some of the best development we've seen out of Jimmy came under Tibbs because he's that type of player. He's 29th overall pick, comes in, has to grind, and Tibbs is going to give you those shots. But yeah, I mean, I do want actually, I'll stick to the Towns piece. Just looking at his resume in Minnesota, if you compare it to Randle's recent resume, Randle over the last 4 years has been All-Star 3 times. Towns has been All-Star twice. Towns has only been All-NBA once in that span. Randle's been
yeah,
All-NBA twice. Both
yeah,
All-Stars last year. So if you look at it that way, you could get tricked by this trade, but I think we have to remember Randle in the playoffs. So he's been an All-Star 3 times. First time he was an All-Star, those are the 3 times he's been in the playoffs. Obviously, the third time he was injured.
yeah.
The first time he was in the playoffs, played 5 games. Scored 18 points per game. Shot 29% from the field,
He was
33%.
horrid.
Yeah, that's the first time, and that's only 5 games, so be it. But last year, not this past year, but the year previous in 22-23, plays 10 games, 16 points per game, 35% from the field, 25% from three. And
Yeah,
that is the issue. Like, I think
yeah,
Towns, if Tibbs player or not, this is a guy who in his playoff career is 19 points per game on 47% from the field, 36% from three. He's a 7-footer. He's a 7-footer who contributed to a team that was able to strap Jokic. Was he a
yeah.
main cause of that? Not really, in my opinion, but, contributed
He
to
was
that.
there.
And so I think objectively, this is a really steep upgrade. Like on the Randall spot
Yeah.
itself, I think this is a pretty steep upgrade. We could talk about Dante in the first and whatever, but
We'll talk about Dante. So yes, I agree with all that. The one piece that I think gets overlooked is Randle in the Cavs series 2 playoffs ago was atrocious from the floor, as you brought up, but he was bullying Evan Mobley and Jared Allen around the court. So there are some intangibles he does. I took the liberty of making a kind of Cat versus Randle pros versus cons. Cat is obviously a much better shooter, a much better spacer. He's wildly more efficient. I looked it up in the average EFG shooting percentage for last season was 54.7. Cat's like a career .576, sometimes hitting
Mhm.
and Randle's like a career 500, sometimes lower into the 400s. So that is a net. He's not an efficient shooter. They're very similar on turnovers, but here's where Randle's better. Randle's a much better passer. He's a much better rebounder. It's much more physical. And might as well, a few minutes in, start with the hot take. I think Randle's a much higher ceiling, which sounds crazy to say because Towns is like such a blue chip prospect. But I think when Randle has it all together, I think it's ridiculous. But there's the floor, which Randle's floor is so much lower than Cat. Which Max, you brought it up. Like both guys have a reputation for taking a step back in the playoffs. Cat goes from all-star to still a very good player, just a little bit quiet at times. Randle can be detrimental on the court. He can be poison, which Cat almost never is. Worst case, he's just a little quiet.
And on a team with Brunson, you can't. I mean, we can now we're delving into the rationales behind the trade, but
Yeah.
Randle at his best is with a team that's running through him. He can be the passer. He can be the fulcrum of the offense. If he wants to
Yeah.
bully the man that's guarding him, he can go do that. But on this team, he kind of needs to fall in line a little bit, unfortunately, with Brunson. Brunson is that good. And
Yeah.
Towns is perfect for this role. Towns doesn't need to create off the dribble for himself, but he can. He doesn't need to take the ball to the rack, but he can. He can spot up. Doesn't need it so. Yeah, I don't know. Fit wise, this makes so much sense to me. I don't know. Like Randle, we were thinking for a long like we've all talked about this offline. Randle has got to get traded. That's a conversation, and you've disagreed, Mark. I've agreed at times. I've disagreed. But that's like a sort of conversation we've had for like 4 years running now. And for the outcome of that to be Towns in a vacuum, this is a major upgrade. Especially, and we're not even talking about the fact that y'all don't have any centers. Like Randle also cannot play center from what we have seen. And it maybe that would have changed. If that had changed, his ceiling's super high, but we can't guess about stuff now. Like they're both
that was theoretical.
Yeah, they're both 29 now. We know who they are, so I don't know.
So, okay, one thing more on you saying that we've been talking for years about this. For years, I'd been saying, I'm open to trading Randle, but what's the price? Like, he is not a guy that I ever felt, even at his lowest point, that I ever felt he was a, by all costs, just get me on his team, eat the damage, take your losses. I always thought, whoa, hang on. He's 24, 8, and 6. That if, those numbers got to come from somewhere. You can't just give them away for anything. But this is very good return for it. But what's really like confusing to me, and I just can't wrap my head around, is even through that high opinion of Randle, I did feel at times like, what is this obsession that Tibbs and Leon have? What is this commitment to him? And, they brought him here. He was so frustratingly bad his first year, but then slowly improved. He brought the team to the playoffs. He, once RJ left, I love RJ, but they don't play well on the court together. They're very similar players who both, they go to the rim first and they shoot second. So that doesn't work well. And RJ left and OG comes in, Brunson comes with shooters, and all of a sudden it's the best fit they've ever had for Randle. And this offseason, adding McHale, I thought, all right, finally they love this guy. They always wanted to build around him and they never did. Now they finally have. I'm interested to see how it goes. And then they trade him. So it's very, very bizarre to me that I felt like they had this guy they loved and never built around him, finally built around him. And they're like, all right, you can go.
And I think to your point, perhaps you're waiting for the right guy to fall out of the sky. And here we go with Minnesota, who we can get into them, to a certain extent, but worried about their financial situation. Okay, we can't afford to pay for this guy anymore, who's just going to cost too much money. I still think it's a huge upgrade for you guys because to this point, if you look at this lineup, you have Randle, who's going to have to play that center position. And in the Eastern Conference, that just wasn't really going to fly. I mean, you're thinking about who they're going to play against, and he's going to go up against Embiid. He's going to go up against Giannis. He's going to go up against Bam. He's going to go up against a healthy, knock on wood for the boys, Porzingis. I think with Cat, this just creates a whole different set of problems that with Randle, maybe it felt clunky to me, but I think the shooting woes were something that potential that you're talking about, it was so few and far between that you had to wonder, the floor for this Knicks team with Cat feels so much safer, and the bottom is not going to fall out.
Yeah.
I mean, I I have to be honest. Randall, the issue is you were kind of building around Randall, but Brunson is just so much better.
So much better.
The Brunson, unfortunately for Randall, like he got screwed here. Don't get me wrong, he got screwed here.
Yeah.
He didn't get his extension. He didn't I mean, he got an extension. He didn't get this one, even though he just averaged 25 a game. But Brunson is just so much better. You cannot waste a top 10 player. And unfortunately, in my opinion, trotting out Randall with Mitch Robinson hurt and Jericho Sims pretty much that's irresponsible. You're wasting Brunson's time at that point, who just took $100 million pay cut for you, you know? And that I have my issues with Randall, but this is also a trade. We'll get to this later. This is an irresponsible trade from Minnesota, in my opinion. This is a terrible trade. This is an awful, terrible, atrocious trade, in my opinion. I don't know if this value was here as much as, I think other people have said, oh, maybe, at the deadline, is this trade still here? Maybe, but I also think maybe Minnesota smartens up. I don't really, we'll get to this later, but I think maybe Minnesota smartens up by then. I think this value is here. Got to take it.
But I think the reason why I don't fully agree, because I think, yes, I hear what you're saying about, Brunson being so much better, bad trade for Minnesota. Most teams do need a guy, a secondary ball handler. And while obviously we know Julius Randle, in his heart, he is the first, second, and third option. He had played a backseat role to Brunson for a year and a half, and it was starting to go pretty well. And he looked like he was kind of settling in that role. And he's still going to be a secondary option for Anthony Edwards. And Brunson now I feel has a less clear who is taking the second shot. If Brunson's locked up game-winning drive, who's taking that next shot?
Oh, Cat. Who else?
Yeah, Cat. But
not OG.
My other thing is actually, I don't think there's actually that many teams who need a second option. When you rack your brain, most the Magic, they got their two guys. The Celtics, they got their two guys. Obviously, Celtics is a bad example. Lakers got their two guys. Clippers got their two guys. Sixers got their three guys. The issue is
you're saying all the good teams.
No, but run down the list. Even the issue is the bad teams don't want to bring in Randall because you're not developing anyone with next to Randall. Are you adding him to the Kings? Are you adding him to the Hornets? Are you adding him to the Rockets? Are you adding him to the Grizzlies? I don't know. These are all really tough teams, and we'll get to this again. I don't want to delve into the Minnesota part, but Randall's also a really weird player. Randall takes up a lot of space. Randall takes up space without spacing the floor, frankly.
Yeah, he's not a good spacer.
And as much as he is a ball handler, a lot of teams right now already have guys on their team that they want to get the ball to. If anything, right now, there's not enough ball in the NBA. There's too many guys who want it. The Pelicans, I think, are a really good example.
I think that is in a vacuum a great point. But when I was watching the Knicks last playoffs, Randall was not there. Brunson in, the Indiana series at times was this guy needs help, and we had good players around. We had OG, we had Dante, we had not a lot of guys who could handle. Brunson needed Randall to take some of the stress off. And I guess Cat can handle and have the ball enough in his hands. I think Cat, Mikhail, and OG, those are three guys who aren't as much of I want the ball in my hands, let me make a shot, more so than Randall is. And I kind of wanted that guy in my 2B player or my 2A player. Maybe I'm sleeping on Cat's ability to clutch up and take initiative with the rock in his hands. I see him.
Game 7 against the Nuggets. Cat was disgusting.
Was just about to say 23, 12, 2 assists, 2 steals, 57% from the floor, 6 for 6 from the free throw line.
That's better than the performance we've seen from Randall, maybe. No, but I see your point.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the lack of Knicks fandom, because to your point, Julius Randle really did start the sort of the post-Melo, post-Kristaps failed experiment era of the Knicks that brought them to this against the first round against the Hawks. There was a new buzz in the city.
Yeah.
Brunson comes along and he really kickstarted it. So it was always tough when you see a player go like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right when I think this was his best chance, you know?
You want to see him do it.
I wanted to see him do it because we got shooters around him.
Yeah.
I think Max, I don't think he'd be playing the small ball center for the majority of the minutes. I think they'd be limping along with Precious and Sims, which wouldn't be great, but you can manage. And then Randle, getting some small ball 5 minutes. I think with all those shooters around him driving into the towards the rim and then kicking out to a bunch of 40% three shooters, I think that would have been amazing. But the fact that this is year 4 of him, and I'm saying like maybe he can finally figure it out. Maybe that's when all right, maybe that's not the guy. Like you said, that's not the guy you want around Jalen Brunson.
Yeah, that's kind of my base of my take is I think Randall's a really good player. I think he's a top 50 player, but I just think Cat is like just a better fit situationally, etc.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of we haven't delved into other parts of the trade, but that's kind of like the base of my take with this trade is I think Cat is he's just better and he fits the needs more. And if Ihart and Mitch Robinson are still on this team, both healthy, maybe I feel a little differently about them making this move so aggressively after the McCall Bridges trade. Because, I think as a Knicks fan, and I guess we can kind of get into this now, but mentally, you go from the McCall trade, you think that's your big acquisition. We just dropped 4 firsts or whatever, and a salary for McCall Bridges, and this is a trade with the Nets. And then all of a sudden you go from that to, oh no, we're actually doubling down. We're actually bringing in Cat too. And now we don't necessarily have another move. We have some first available that we could trade, but we don't really have another move after this.
This is going to be it for a good bit in terms of like significant trades.
Yeah. So mentally, how does I imagine that's like.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy because I was so ready to talk OG trade with you guys for the longest time. And I've been calling the headquarters of Spittin Hoops, but you guys have been slammed. Finally get on, and there's been 2 blockbuster trades since. But after the OG trade, what I was preparing to say on this pod was it's crazy because the team is better, but the scary thing is the clock is officially ticking. We've been a rebuilding team for the longest time, and as a rebuilding team, all you need to do is sit back and watch the grass grow and watch the team get better. But now we've traded OG, we've traded our young assets. The clock is on. It's time to score, or score big in this window while your best players are in their prime. And I was kind of like, if the window is ticking, we need to make a more move. Like we're not ready to compete. And Leon did it before the next season even started. He made 2 of them. So like that is insane to me that I was like, after OG, I was like, all right, Leon, what's your next move? You made a big trade, but this wasn't enough. And he said, here's 2 more for you.
Watch this.
How about 2 more for you?
Yeah, how about 2 more for you? The one question I also have, and Mark, you alluded to this, is the continuity factor.
Yeah.
and Mikal Bridges, he's an amazing player. He really does feel like a plug and play guy. What we saw what he was as the best player in the Nets didn't really move the needle for them. That's just one of the big questions where you did have DiVincenzo coming off a fantastic playoff run where he scored 30 points multiple games.
Yeah.
And then Randle, right? Like, what was he going to do with this new team where all the vibes were really high? I know there were a few comments on DiVincenzo maybe not being happy about the lack of playing time he was going to get. Yeah, who knows about that? So that's
he took
one
a
question.
pay cut to come here.
He did, and so that's the one question that you have to wonder. You're bringing 2 new stars. This feels like all these personalities feel like they will mesh well. OG came and immediately they were 23-2 or whatever with him on the court with Brunson. The one thing is, how is it going to go when they all start playing together?
I gotta imagine the chemistry is gonna be pretty good. Can we now break into the Nova Knicks aspect of this? That like you said, Dante's lighting it up. They finally get all the Infinity Stones, and then they trade them. I definitely do feel like I like the chemistry, but on the continuity aspect, I wish they had kind of just see what we have with the trade we made this summer before we been into this big one. If there's any universe where we can make this cat trade later, I wish that we'd be able to, because we just made a huge trade. I want to see what happens there. We were already a good trade, and we got rid of 6 first-round picks for Mikal. Let's see what that does before we get rid of Randle, you know?
I mean, I don't hate that take, honestly. I will say
Yeah.
I don't hate that take. I just genuinely, I think, I don't know. I wonder, I really think value-wise, this is just a crazy good trade. And they were like, fuck it. Like, honestly,
Yeah.
I don't know.
And then if you look this offseason and you like kind of combine it and say the Randle and Dante for Cat and Mikal, forget about the picks. But if you just look at those players 2 for 2, like, is that team better? You're like, yeah, that team is a lot better.
And honestly, even if you extend it to last year, if you go like, even when the trade started happening, you go RJ quickly, Dante, Randall for, if you're going to tell me I'm getting OG McCollum and Towns, like, okay, baby.
Yeah.
That was pretty good. I don't know. Any other points you guys want to make on like the specific like Towns, Randall topics? Like overall, I think this is a really big win for the Knicks. I actually think. I'm not sure if another like the other route was waiting a little longer, but I think if you wait a little longer, I think Towns is off the table, and I think you're actually waiting for a bigger star because I don't think Towns is available.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
No, and to your point, Max, like they, Mitch is hurt and will come back, but it's never for too long while he's back.
Yeah.
And like they clearly needed a center, and then as they're shopping around, somehow the name Karl Anthony Towns came up, and they said, "Oh yeah, we were thinking Jonas Valanciunas." So
yeah, sure.
we'll take a call on Karl Anthony Towns. And apparently, what I heard from my insider sources is that it started as a Randle for Cat conversation, and the Timberwolves said, "How about Dante?" And the Knicks said no, and the Knicks thought about it more and more and came back and said fine. So I think that is probably pretty good business. And my whole like wonder about what could Randle have done in the small ball 5? What could he have done with all these shooters around him? What could Dante have done with the Villanova Knicks? If we get off to a hot start and we finish first, second seed, I'm going to be a whole lot less curious about what could have. So maybe in a few months, I'm saying, yeah, I don't give a shit about the Nova Knicks. Right now, I am kind of wondering, like, did we make this second trade before seeing what the first one would have done?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty fair, honestly. Anthony, what do you think? Do you think it's a dub? For Knicks.
I think it's a A- to A level grade jump. Because all the points that Mark brought up pretty well, you do lose some depth here.
Yeah.
I think Dante was really coming into his own on this team. He was very impressive. But, when you have the chance to get the best player, you got to get the best player. Yeah. We haven't really talked about the Timberwolves side of it. I don't know yet. I'm going to hold off on my reservations on what this trade feels like for them, because we're immediately kind of going to floor spacing, and the idea of Randle and Gobert just sounds like clunky in the paint.
That sounds horrible.
Yeah. Want to kind of see how it goes before making that assessment. But so that feels like a sidestep, but this one definitely feels like an upgrade. And it's a team, again, looking at the starting lineup, and then you guys have a bench. You have Miles McBride. You have Precious. Who am I forgetting? You got Campaign, who's his playoff experience.
Landry Shamet.
Got a Landry Shamet, the GOAT.
Yeah, don't forget him.
I mean, I think we'll get to the Minnesota aspect itself later, but that is my one concern. Like, I think in a vacuum trade, great trade. I think this moves the Knicks into a top 3 team. I'm pretty concerned about the bench. So Dante, we can get into him a little bit now that we're kind of transitioning away from wins and losses here for the Knicks. But 40% from 3 last year, 40% from 3 the year before that. Went from 10 points per game with the Warriors, 15 points per game with the Knicks.
That it? Only 40%?
Yeah. But I mean, 40%. This is a guy who's shooting 9 of them a game. So
Yeah,
this is like a
he's
really
fucking
significant amount. And in the
Very
playoffs
impressive.
shot,
playoffs 44-5.
yeah, 42%, 42.5% in the playoffs on 8 threes a game. That is disgusting. 18 points per game. And so you're losing that. And funnily enough, I think Dante was just on a super hot streak in the playoffs. I don't think he's that player constantly. Like, don't get me wrong.
Well, you've seen it.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah.
As and I think he was good with the Warriors too. But you see the hot streaks, and on the Knicks though, it worked. This fit was better. He was the best player that he's ever been.
Playing with his buddies, it's
The
gonna.
power of friendship. In a vacuum, I don't think he's a spectacular player. I think for the Knicks though, he was your fifth best player on this team if he stuck around. I think he's probably or him or Josh Hart, right? And so that depth wise is a big loss.
I think it is a big loss, and I think he's going to continue to be a good three-point shooter for a few years. But something I was thinking about before I came on was I was looking at some of the best three-point shooters in recent memory. None of them really are, other than like Steph, none of them are really like guys who are known as sharpshooters. I'm not talking like James Harden and Steph Curry, like guys whose job is to shoot threes. None of them are that good for that long. Like where's Joe Harris? Where is Yuta Watanabe? Like Buddy Hill took a bit of a dive here and there. He's come back and forth. So not saying Dante's gonna fall off a cliff or anything, but like good 3-point shooting is not. It's what you want it's weird because on one hand it's what you want to build your team around, but it's not. It's kind of fickle. It's like a pitcher who throws 103 in baseball. Like they're gonna suck in a couple of years, like they always do. So I'm sure Dante's going to be great this year, and he's more than just a Yuta Watanabe like 3-point shooter. He's got more aspects to his game, but I don't feel like we're entirely gonna. I don't feel like that's irreplaceable. Like McBride has showed he can shoot pretty well. Actually, McHale can shoot. OG can shoot. We got shooters on the team. So, and Cat can shoot pretty damn well too.
Yeah, I mean he's better than all of them.
Yeah.
And also depth-wise, I mean, I'm also criticizing the depth. That's more so because of injuries, because we know Tibbs is going to play 8 guys in the regular season, and they're going to play 36 minutes a game. And that in itself, I can't say is super intelligent, but given y'all got 8 good-ass players, and he's going to play 8 of them a lot.
Yeah, and he's going to play. And I was so ready. I was so ready to come on this podcast. As of Thursday night or Friday night last week, I was... Before 10 p.m., I was so ready to come on and say, Tibbs has improved in so many ways. He's got better with his rotations. He's shifted to be a 3-point shooting guy when he never was. He's, plays rookies when he never did. This is the time where he can improve on his last flaw, which is he can spread the minutes, share the love, because now we have a deep team. And like, now we got rid of all the depth and we got Karl-Anthony Towns. There's only 8 guys who are going to play. They're going to play 40 minutes a game.
Good luck.
Well, there goes that.
Seriously.
Damn, Mark, you may have just convinced me away from my A- to A point.
They're gonna run. They're gonna run.
Cat is gonna be in the best shape of his life.
Yeah. So I have a question to ask you, gentlemen, if that's all right.
Oh.
Mitch comes back. Say he's healthy. What's the rotations like there? Are you prioritizing having Mitch on the say Mitch is healthy, right? There's no worry about keeping him injured. He's in perfect form. Are you doing a little Cat at the 4 in the playoffs? What's your starting lineup? What's your closing lineup? Like what do you guys think there?
For me, just off the rip, great question. I think Mitch comes in, definitely helps out. 5 Cats at the 4. You put one of those 3 wing guys to the bench. You rotate them in and out. Miles McBride also joins that. To your point, I really think it's a matchup thing. And I don't know why this team pops up, but the 2020 Lakers in the bubble, Dwight Howard was used only every once in a while. And there was a series, whether it was the first round or the second, I forget, but he was not used at all. In the Nuggets series, he came in and then to your point, Max, in the Nuggets series, the series before against the Rockets, he barely plays. And then he comes in against the Nuggets and he absolutely dominates, and locks down Jokic. So to your point, are they going to be playing against an Embiid where you're going to try to, get as many fouls as you can against a big guy like that, or even the Cavs, or are you going to play against? I guess there's not a lot of small teams in the Eastern Conference.
Well,
So
Celtics, you're not playing Mitch in the last 5
could be the exact. Yeah, that's a good
So,
example.
Wait, say that again. If it's the Celtics, we're not playing Mitch, you think?
Yeah, I don't.
No Mitch. You need wing depth.
But if it's Horford and
But those guys, these aren't paint
Porzingis?
players. These aren't paint players, anyways. Towns can hold his own against Porzingis in the paint. You know, like that's fine.
And then you can do OG. You know,
yeah, OG can guard
little
Horford
help on
offensively at this
Horford.
point.
And a 38-year-old Horford,
Yeah.
So, Anthony, I'm so happy you brought up the bubble Lakers because one of my biggest takes is, do you guys know who, in my opinion, is the biggest unsung hero of that Lakers team? Max, you probably heard me say it.
Oh.
JaVale McGee. Because he started at center all year and kept 80 at the 4 and kept him fresh. So that when the playoffs came, JaVale didn't play a minute. Okay, his ass was on the bench cheering, but AD was not spent playing 82 games, banging with Joel Embiid down low. So I think we need a JaVale McGee on our team. We need some maybe it'll end up being Jericho Sims or Precious Achiuwa, but I think we need a reliable big to absorb a lot of those center minutes and just hold the fall. I really wish we had gone after an Andre Drummond, Goga, or Mo Bamba, so we could have that a real big guy to just play down low. And I think Cat's best position is not at the 5, but for the regular season, you want him at the 4 a little bit to keep him from standing under the rim and risking injury. And I think that's the biggest thing we're missing right now. But who knows? Maybe opening night it is Jericho Sims playing the 5, and I actually would be happy with that.
And I mean, there's still trade conversations with Mitch, right? You never know what happens there. I don't know. At this point, is it Walker Kessler? I mean, actually, that'd be kind of nice. That'd be kind of nice.
That would be nice.
Yeah, that's a bad example.
That would be unbelievable.
Yeah, that would be nice. But even if let's say if Precious can play 15 minutes at the center, and then Mitch can come back, and Mitch can play 20 minutes at center. So in the regular season, if I have to play Towns at 12 minutes at the center, all right, so be it. That's all good with me.
It might be good enough that we could even do it with Jericho. We're so loaded that maybe we can get away with Jericho Sims against some bad teams, and we could beat the Cavs with Jericho Sims at center.
I mean, are you telling me Jalen Duren is gonna this is crazy? This is a little crazy. If you put OG Anunoby at the 5, is Jalen Duren eating up OG Anunoby? Probably not. With
a little bit of help. With a little bit of help, nah.
In the regular season, I don't know.
Josh Hart comes over to help. OG, no, we're chilling.
Yeah. With that, let's transition a little bit here now, because we've been talking a lot about the Knicks, and validly so. I just want to make a few points about the T-Wolves. I alluded to this previously. Unless people have other Knicks points to make really quick, we can also circle back.
Circle back, yeah.
Yeah, we'll circle back later. The T-Wolves. So here they're making a really interesting trade. They are trading a absolute icon for their franchise, a 4-time All-Star, a guy who was here since he was 20, since 2015. He's the first guy to make an impact in Minnesota since KG. I mean, Kevin Love was terrific. They just were not a good team, individually, at the time of Kevin Love, right? And as much as Wiggins was there, Wiggins never really panned out. Towns was really the man, All-NBA by his 3rd season, So
Rookie of the year.
Yeah. And that's the sort of guy we're trading here. This is the second best player on a team last year that, made the Western Conference Finals, right? So to trade a player of that stature, I know the salary is a little crazy, and so be it, but you should be getting back a ton. And in my opinion, the first round pick here is relatively obsolete. I personally don't think it will convey. It may convey, if the Pistons get out of their, if they make a play-in game, who knows? So maybe it'll convey. But my bigger issue is everyone's talking about this being a money thing, and this being, they needed to get out of Karl Anthony Towns' contract. The T-Wolves are still in the second apron this year. They are still a second apron team for this year.
Ridiculous.
The Towns with him, they were still in that second apron. Who cares how much of the second apron you're in?
And it's crazy. It's crazy for a championship caliber team to make a move to create financial flexibility when no one historically comes to your city. When you can't sign free agents. You're not LA, you're not Miami. Your moves now are re-sign Randle, which who's going to want a lot of money, or you say, okay, well, we're going to use the money more wisely in free agency. On who? Who's going to want to come to Minnesota?
And you're gonna be over the cap anyways. Like you won't even be able to bring anyone in. Like you got Naz Reid to pay. Gobert's gonna pick up that team option next year. So just for a little bit more context as to the Minnesota situation, is that they were over the cap, or they're in the second apron already, even though they just got in Randle, which was a 15 to $20 million pay cut compared to Towns. They're still second apron. Next year, Randall's got a player option. Naz Reid's got a player option for 15 mil. He'll decline, re-sign for like 20 mil. Gobert's got an option for 50 mil. I'm reporting that he's probably going to pick that up.
Yeah.
So you've got, and your only bet here, like if Randle is terrible, he's going to pick up his option and you're going to be over the apron again and you're going to have to dump this contract. If he's really good, you're going to want to re-sign him. Guess what? You can't. Because now you're actually going to be over the second apron again for the second time, and now you'll be starting to see all the consequences. So with Towns, why are you not running it back? Why are you not running it back? And my bigger issue, value-wise, I understand what Randle is. Randle as a player is really good. Randle situationally will only be on this team for a year or 2 years max. Like if he is terrible, he'll be on this team for 2 years. But if he's good, he's out next year. So if I can't understand making that trade value-wise, because that's not a lot of value in my opinion. And if you call the Warriors, like this is my example. Yo, give us Wiggins. We want 5 firsts. And we'll give you Towns. The Warriors are having an emergency meeting and then are probably accepting it because Steph Curry is 37 and they don't care about their picks. And at that point, would you rather just get a haul of picks? All of these picks that you spent trading up for Dillingham, all these picks you spent trading for Gobert, would you rather not just replenish your picks if you ever need to trade Towns? If you decide you don't want to be in the second apron again this year, at the end of this year, would you rather just all that for picks? And so that's my issue with this whole trade. That's like,
no, I agree.
You just shot yourself in the foot completely, and that I'm out on this trade for Minnesota. I was halfway before, and now I think it's terrible.
Yeah. And for a non-destination city, the picks are a lot more valuable than alleged financial flexibility, which you're telling me they don't even have. Question, the Gobert money is monstrous, right? Like they can't get off that. They can't trade that, right?
I mean, the thing is,
what about a team like could they have traded Gobert to a team like New Orleans who needed a center? Like would that have been possible? Because I think that would be preferable than getting off Cat.
Yes, it's totally possible. Towns and Gobert are basically making the same amount of money. Like a little bit of an exaggeration, but yeah. Actually, Towns is making $6 million more than Gobert. So I don't know. Like the one worry with Towns is if Towns, for example, breaks his leg tomorrow and you're Minnesota and you kept him around, you're screwed like a little bit there just because he's got the big contract for a long time. But it's like if you're operating like that, like, don't own a franchise. Like
a lot of players who, if they break their leg, would screw over the team's financial flexibility.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Boney, what do you think about the on-court fit? To take the money out of it, which is big. But.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really looking at this, and it. First off, the first thing I texted Max was this felt like a slightly different situation, but DeMar DeRozan trade from the Raptors. Mm-hmm. Like, grew up. Like that was his franchise. They could never really get over the hump. Slightly different context here. So just in terms of a fan, if I was a fan of Cat, I think he was really coming into his own. And to your point about Randle with the Knicks, I was really excited to see what the Timberwolves were going to do and run it back with this team. So with that being said, we got to move into the future. I'm still really high on this team. Like, don't get me wrong. Anthony Edwards is just a stud. He's going to take a step again, and he's just going to be unbelievable. I think he played really, really well. He slowed down at the end there, but if he can keep his shooting consistent, he's just going to be unstoppable. Mike Conley, Dante DiVincenzo, and Jaden McDaniels kind of rounding out that guard rotation is absolutely filthy. So you still have the veteran leadership. You bring in Joe Ingles, who's kind of ineffective. He's not ineffective, but he's old.
They brought in Joe?
They brought in Big Joey, yeah.
No
so
way.
him and Gobert reunite with Mike Conley again. So you kind of have the Utah Jazz moving over this way.
That's every team's goal to bring back the old Utah Jazz.
The old Utah Jazz, yeah. Next up is
Jordan Clarkson trade.
Yeah, exactly. But and then besides that, I think Nas Reed, I mean, to Max's point, money-wise, gonna have to take a step. I'm gonna keep money out of this. Man, I think this team is still really, really scary. And if Julius Randle, hey, he's a streaky shooter, but if that streak gets on a good, if the dice rolls the right way in the playoffs, they could win the championship. I don't see why they couldn't. This is an unlikely but feasible finals matchup right here that we're talking about between these two teams.
I actually really agree. For the past week, I'm a Knicks guy. I'm more East Coast ball. I didn't watch the Nuggets too much. I didn't realize what a good 3-point shooting team they were. And even Nas Reed is chopping. It's really just Rudy who can't shoot. So at first I was thinking, Randall's leaving a team filled with shooters. That's going to hurt him. The Timberwolves were a better 3-point shooting team last year, and they lost Cap, but they're bringing in Dante. I think this could work. The problem, like you guys were alluding to, is Rudy and Randle on the court at the same time. But is that any worse than what they've had the last few years, Randle and Mitch at the same court? And that's worked at times. So the bigger question is can Randle, because I think Randle will take more of a backseat to Edwards than he would to Brunson. But I actually think that could work. It worked well. And Randle, I think, maintains the physical, like the physicality that they had on this team much more so than Cat. So their identity as just like motherfuckers who are, they got a lot of height on that team, a lot of physical players. Randle's defense gets blasted, rightfully so, because he checks out. But when he's checked in, he is a very good defender, and he's very physical, and he can defend the rim really well. So I actually could see this work. I think this is a very, very flawed team at its core with Randle and Gobert and Edwards, who needs the ball a lot. But the upside is they can be really tough to play.
I mean, I hear y'all. Like, I think the upside is really good, but I also think the upside involves like Randall's going to need to be okay being more perimeter oriented and standing more towards the perimeter on offense, like just in general, because as much as, he did have to play with Mitch and he did have to play with Josh Hart, they like, I don't know, Jaden, sorry, I almost called him Jalen. Jaden McDaniels shot like 33% from three last year. And he's not going to shoot that every year. Like that's a bad season for him, but like, that's another rough shooter. And I think Towns was actually a really major problem solver for this Minnesota team in terms of spacing. And I think Ant is at his best when he's barreling to the rim and he's got no one in front of him. And already having Gobert in front of him made me want to rip my hair out. And I'm going to rip my hair out even more when Randall's in the post, like asking for the ball. Ant is sizing a guy up.
Yeah.
Gobert's sitting right under the rim, and Ant's going to start running towards the rim too, and like, unless Ant, and this is another thing, if Ant changes his game style to become a lot more perimeter oriented, a lot more efficient from the field, from perimeter also, maybe we're having a different discussion. So there is that, and Ant is incredible, who knows, but I just don't love the idea that I have this potential superstar face of the league, and I'm going to add obstacles on his way to the rim. At its core is really difficult for me to wrap my head around. I still think this team is nasty. And I actually think one of the reasons they make this trade is because you can't trade Towns for 10 picks and sell it to your fan base. Like if they had traded this offseason, like again, that package I was talking about earlier, the fake package of like Wiggins and 10 picks, you can't sell that to your fan base, This you can sell it. We are trying. Like we are trying to.
Yeah.
Well, if we've got to dump Randle next year, we'll take care of it next year. For now, we're trying. And like, I have to respect that to a certain extent. I'm just really skeptical. This team is like, I think it's like the 5th best team in the West. And I'm really high. I'm really high. But
you kind of just poked holes in my logic of I'm thinking the Timberwolves are one of the top shooting teams in the league. They had Dante, but what you're kind of saying is you can have the Rudy Gobert when you got another 7-footer who's dropping threes at the highest clip any center has had. You take that away, then you see the Rudy problems.
I agree, but I will say if Naz starts playing 30 minutes a game and they cut minutes elsewhere, I think Naz is that freaking good where, Naz can do a Rudy impression, but where's Randall then? But And then on top of that, though, I will say Naz plus Randall front courts against smaller centers are gonna demolish these front or smaller centers. Like, what's a good example? Like, honestly, even like I'm trying to like even against the Celtics, like they're a West Coast. I was trying to look for a thing for a Western Conference team, but a Naz plus Randall front court would be really weird for the Celtics to play against because that front court would be able to really engage in how mobile it is compared to other teams.
Two like undersized centers who can like kind of hold their own at center, but also like are physical and can shoot. You know, the thing that the Timberwolves that's interesting is the Timberwolves are like they're going to be able to throw a lot of different looks at you. They're just going to I think their biggest key is they're going to have to say like our mentality can't be Rudy's got to play 34 minutes a night. Their mentality's got to be like throw a lot of different looks at you. Like Rudy's got to have to sit on the bench at times. Randall and Nas are going to have to sit at the bench, but there's a lot they can play around with there.
I think to your guys' points, two Western Conference teams that popped into my mind. One easier, one not as easy, but the Mavericks are a team that with that is going to struggle against that specific lineup that you're talking about, Max.
Yeah.
And then the other one, to a lesser extent, but I think the Thunder could be another team that they could expose just with their size. I pulled up the 3-point percentage shooting of last year. Mike Conley, 44%. Obviously, you lose Cat, who was 41, but Naz Reid, 41. To Max's point, if he plays more minutes, what happens there? Nickeil Alexander-Walker, 39%. Anthony Edwards, if he becomes more of a superstar, that moves up from 36%. And then you get Rob Dillingham, who shot a pretty good percentage clip, I think, in college as well, right? So
yeah,
I think there's a lot, like Mark's saying, that you can play around with. Obviously, the big concern remains, what do you do with these two guys who are clogging up the paint, especially to Max's point of Anthony Edwards being at his most effective when he can get downhill. But this is also another year of Rudy Gobert in this new system with these players that he's known for the most part for the last couple of years. So
yeah. Do you know who's another team who I think they match up well against with any way you said it with the front court is the Kings. I think Randall and Nas Reid versus DeMar and Sabonis, that is not safe for work television. The Kings will get bullied.
Sabonis' ankles are going to be on the floor by game 3 of that series because that's like Naz and Randall are extremely mobile and like that is
physical, violent players.
To be honest, like my most fun trade here is like if Gobert could go, like honestly, like if Gobert could leave and I could just watch a team try to start Naz and Randall, that would be extremely fun to me. Because I also think Gobert's really good, but this team's got the perimeter defense to play 2 6'9" centers in Naz and Randall. So
I just hate I hate Gobert. I hate watching him play.
And the thing is, the stats disagree with all of us, right? But I mean, I can't.
Unfortunately,
we could also we could talk about this hypothetical, but like, could you have traded Gobert to a team like the Pelicans? And if I'm looking at a team now with Ingram, like let's say you get Ingram and 3 firsts. If I get Ingram and 3 firsts for the Pelicans for Gobert, do I like that team better with Towns, Naz, front court, Ingram at the 4/3, and McDaniels? I there are some hypotheticals here, and I'm sure they looked around. Or actually, I'm not sure because Tim.
Does that money match up decently well?
I think so. I mean, Ingram is on a weird situation. Sorry, let me just be sure I'm not messing this up. So yeah, Ingram's has a weird situation where he is expiring this year, but right now his contract would be enough to match Gobert because he's at 37 and Gobert's at like 43. So you get you find $4 million in the way. But that's kind of for both. Like don't get me wrong, that's a huge win for the Pelicans. But I wonder for the T-Wolves, the Pelicans have no one to trade for right now, and they're about to walk into the season starting Daniel Tice. And if I'm the T-Wolves, could I have just held the Pelicans at gunpoint? Nah, we want Ingram and 5 firsts. Throw in Alvarado. Throw in this person. And I just wonder if there were teams like that who were super desperate. And I think there are teams. I think the Knicks were pretty desperate, and they just this fell into their lap.
Oh my God! Imagine if they offered Rudy and we took it.
I mean, honestly though, a side note. Rudy for Randle straight up is a super spicy trade. I actually don't hate that at all.
I'm gonna log off.
I don't. I don't.
I don't even want to hear your take on that. It'll make me too upset.
No, I mean, and I, I have my issues with Rudy, which is why I would have traded him first. Like
Yeah.
that's kind of the guy. But then when you
The
just
Pelicans would be, dude, if you're telling the Pelicans, like, hey, you need a center, how about the defensive player of the year? And like we're doing it for this guy who's always been a weird fit, like you might be able to ransom them a little bit
yeah,
for some picks.
that's another one of my issues just with this T-Wolves trade. I've been bashing all pod, and I'll probably keep bashing it all season. But yeah,
I just don't know if they go for Brandon Ingram.
I don't think so either because you have to
If you're the
extend Brandon
Timberwolves.
Ingram. I don't.
Right.
Because the thing is, then you're in the same problem as Randall. But would you have just been more down to run that problem with Ingram than run that problem with Randall? I don't know.
Yeah. I remember when we first heard about the Rudy to the mini trade, and I remember everyone saying, like, what the fuck is
Right.
Minnesota doing? Like trading all those picks for Rudy. And I still think Rudy's a bitch, but like I think that they're looking at it and being like, wait, we had Cat for however many years, 10 years. We're now getting good that we've added in Rudy, adding in Anthony Edwards scoring. Maybe Cat's been the problem the whole time. So I don't know if they would have even done that with the Pelicans, because I think they like the defensive intensity and like identity that Rudy brings, and Cat just doesn't do that.
And you can find 20-point per game scorers easier than you can find a guy who can anchor a whole defense. Just in a vacuum. Like that's not what Cat's not just a 20-point per game scorer. He's also a center. Like that's like.
But I get what you're saying.
But like in a vacuum, like yeah. So
yeah.
That's strong for someone who notoriously is not the biggest fan of a defensive rim adjacent center like you, Max.
Well, I mean, my thing, okay, I mean, we can get into my basketball philosophy here, but my kind of current basketball philosophy is that, like, unless you have some god tier 3-point shooters, you can only run one non-shooter on the court. And one non-shooter means under 33% from three, in my opinion. And so when one non-shooter, Randall right now at certain times can be a non-shooter, for example, and then you also have Gobert. So that instantly, with the way I think about basketball, I think that causes spacing problems. But I think if Gobert is your one guy who is a non-shooter, kind of like Draymond, and Draymond will play with, the thing is Draymond plays with another non-shooter, usually plays next to a center, and that's just Steph Curry difference, so be it. But like,
yeah,
like I think in general, this league has gotten to a point where we want, like, Mavericks, one non-shooter, 4 shooters. T-Wolves like up until now, one non-shooter, 4 shooter. I think the Knicks,
Celtics, everyone could shoot.
Yeah,
Celtics, everyone could shoot. So if anything, it's like, and so I think that's the thing. Like Gobert, if he's your one non-shooter, you're in a really good spot. Like the Jazz were able to be the first seed 3 years in a row with it, and as much as I don't think those teams were that good, if you can win 60 games, you're still a pretty damn good team. Like as much as I might have playoff criticisms of your team, so that's kind of my philosophy there on the Gobert side. I just don't think Minnesota is like, Tim Connolly's like, yeah, my first trade when I got hired was trading for Gobert. It worked, and I'm going to trade him again. Like, no.
Yeah, that hearing that actually makes me feel better about the Knicks, because I've there have been so many different, I feel like, versions of teams that have won the championship in the last however many years. And I've been, constantly asking myself, like, what is the recipe for a championship? Like, there's so many different complicated, like, intricate ways you can build a team. And then the Knicks are kind of like, no, it's not. Just get a whole bunch of shooting, get everyone shooting around. If they're good on defense, great. But like the most important thing is that like everyone on your team chops and you can space the floor. And part of me might be like, did we really just simplify and said, yeah, like we like the small ball of 5 Randall, like we like the team, but be a whole lot better if we had a center who's 7 foot and can shoot threes. Wouldn't that be nice?
I mean, that's an actual recipe.
That is a recipe, and if we look back, it's been 6 different champions the last 6 years. We go from the Raptors, where it was superstar / size, and then you look at the Lakers, 2 star players and size. And then you go to the Bucks. Giannis just went on a tear, injury luck. And then you go to the Warriors. Steph Curry went God mode in the finals. and then heliocentric with Jokic, and then
Yeah.
space, shoot like crazy with the Celtics and good defense. That's what this Knicks team could be. So you got a lot of options that you go with.
They went with the most recent version that
Right.
happens to be probably just the simplest to put together. But something that, so, and speaking of Randle, you're talking about him shooting. The thing that I think most people don't, I've watched a whole lot of Randle. The most frustrating fucking thing that he does is when he's playing off ball, not a whole lot of movement. But
Yeah.
when he's wide open on the perimeter and someone throws the ball to him, at worst, he's a 33% shooter. At best, he's a 40% shooter. So you'd think, yeah, you're wide open on three. Just take it. He catches, he double clutches, he waits for the defender to come in.
Step back.
And step back. Yeah. Anthony Edwards is going to kill him when that happens. And that was one of the most frustrating things. I'm feeling better about this trade. That was one of the most frustrating things about Randle is I feel like your team just did so much work for you, driving to the lane, getting open screens, pass to get you this open shot, and you've just wasted all of that effort by waiting for your defender to come so you can do, a flashy dribble move.
I totally agree. And on that point of the spacing, you also have Josh Hart. Like Josh Hart is not he can shoot the three, but him and Randle combined is one non-shooter. That's two, they're both half non-shooters, and then you play with Mitch. That's two non-shooters on the court. You instantly are not following the rest.
No, I like that math.
Yeah.
Hart's a good shooter in magical moments in the playoffs, not for most of the year.
Seriously. And if that's your team, that's not the recipe. The recipe is the Celtics 5 out or even the Nuggets. They're not a traditional 5 out, but Jokic can be the ball handler in a 5 out system. The only team, I'm looking at the list now. The Raptors, they had floor spacing. Ibaka could shoot the ball. Gasol could shoot the ball. Siakam could shoot the ball. These are not great shooters, but if they ever had a center, that center could shoot the ball. And then you had the Warriors, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson. We're gonna ignore that. Lakers, their lineup in crunch time. If it had Dwight Howard, AD is shooting 36% from three, and then most of the time it's not Dwight Howard. It's just AD down there. And then Rondo is a non-shooter,
right,
who did shoot really well in that.
Who did shoot,
yeah. And then the Bucks, your non-shooter is Giannis.
Brook Mountain.
And then you have Brooke, shooting 40% from the corner. So the recipe up until this trade, I really love this trade. I'm actually talking myself even further into this trade and for the Knicks. The recipe is now there. This team now exists. If the defense, my biggest worry is now just front court defense. I think the scoring is gonna be fine. I think the depth's a little iffy, but most good teams depth is a little iffy. The Celtics just want to chip playing 8 guys, So
and for the one thing is the depth is iffy, but we went from a team where our last few guys on the bench were RG Diacono and what was his name? The guy Keita Bates Diop. The last guys on our bench now, we just cut Marcus Morris, who obviously he's washed at this point, but we're taking in big names, so we got Landry Shamet on the bench, not great players, but rotation players in the league.
Even Tyler Kolek, your first round pick.
I like Tyler Kolek too.
If he I don't think he'll give you any minutes in the playoffs, but he could, as a rookie, play 15 minutes in a regular season game, and even that's need that. Just need that.
Yeah, so do you guys think we start Josh Hart or Deuce McBride? This Hart. That's you think Hart?
Pretty aggressively, yeah. Because I just don't think they don't pair Brunson and McBride's minutes. I don't think. What do you think?
I think it could be Brunson. I think it could be Brunson. I think they like Hart better off the bench, but I wouldn't really be surprised either way. They asked Thibodeau what he said, and he said we'll see. So we're not going to know until opening night. But I wouldn't mind Deuce. But it's it's really more about who closes than who opens.
Well, and then so who would you say is in the closing lineup?
With Mitch Hurt still?
Yeah, with Mitch Hurt.
Yeah, I think closing lineup will definitely be Josh, because I think we'll be leading a lot of games and we're gonna want rebounds. And Josh provides that a lot more than Deuce. But Deuce provides more defense.
Oh, Mark, I love Josh Hart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Josh is the man. Josh is the man. His value when we get closer to the playoffs, he becomes more valuable.
Skyrockets.
Game one is his least valuable game of the year.
Yeah, right.
You know?
The anti-James Harden.
Yes.
Literally. Oh,
Yeah.
Can I throw this out there? I think so. We've done a Sixers preview. We've done a Knicks preview already. In both previews, I was basically like, y'all's team's gonna play in the second round. Whoever's like wins is gonna make the Eastern Conference Finals, and then you'll lose the Celtics probably. I think this Knicks team, unless I see something really new from the 76ers, aka Embiid being healthy for all of the playoffs, like I think this is the second best team in the East, regular season and playoffs.
I think so too, and I actually do like the matchup against the Celtics. Like I think this is as good as you could possibly throw at this Celtics team. Like your two best players are gonna have a steady dose of OG and Mikal, and your unicorn is canceled out by our unicorn. And like if it comes down to the stretch of like what's Tatum gonna do with a minute in his hands versus what Jalen's gonna do in his minute in his hands, I like that. I like that. At the defending champions, with all due respect.
With all due respect, I'm actually just looking at the Sixers depth chart right now. The one thing is their strength is really where you guys are still pretty weak, which is that front court depth that Max alluded to earlier. And who knows? I mean, Embiid has never had a healthy postseason run, so why are we going to start thinking that that's going to start all of a sudden?
Well, they added known playoff performer Paul George, who has never let his team down. So, you know.
And French legend Gershon Yabusele as well.
Oh, that's right. They did. They added a lot of depth. They got
and Drummond. Your boy Drummond too.
But at some point though, they have bodies that they are hoping that these bodies become 20 minutes in playoff game guys. Like respect to Drummond, he's a good player, but you're hoping that he can play 20 minutes of playoff series. Like I think the Knicks have like a really clear 8-man. Then the thing is the Sixers, on the same way the Knicks a month ago weren't finished making trades, the Sixers are definitely not finished making trades. So we'll stay tuned in with that. But yeah, I mean, is it okay? Like even if you guys don't upgrade Mitch, is a wall of Mitch, OG, and Towns like that's not that bad against Embiid? Like
I would love a playoff series where Mitch is playing 20, 28 minutes a game, right? Check me on the math there. He's playing a decent amount of minutes. Some of it is him on the court with Cat, and then a good bit is him, anchoring. Like we could have two totally different units. We could have like a 3-point shooting unit with Cat at center, and then we could have a unit where it's just physical defense, Deuce, Hart, OG, and Mitch. Like Mitch, hell, you could throw Precious in there and really get funky with it, and that's a physical lineup that like most teams would look at that and be like, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
I think Mitch. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think the key is gonna be how do you guys carry through the regular season, because I feel like time and time and time again we go, this is gonna be Celtics, this is gonna be Knicks, then Sixers, then Bucks in that order. And it just never feels like that's the way it goes. It always feels like some Orlando team sneaks in there, or for whatever reason, the Cavs have a fantastic regular season. So I think that's going to be a big key. Can you guys stay healthy? But Mark, this is not a Knicks preview pod. This was a Cat trade pod. That being said, how are you feeling about the Knicks? We actually didn't get your take. Obviously, we didn't talk to you, but what do you think their realistic ceiling will be this year?
Well, I think independent of the Cat trade, it's time to compete for championships. I think that was before and that was after. I think the Mikal Bridges, that's what that signified. We're throwing 6 picks at a guy. Like it's time to compete.
Yeah.
The trading, Randle, that's just different strokes for different folks. Some. Most GMs would make that trade, but not all, I think. I'd feel great. I'd feel disappointed if we don't make a conference finals. Mm-hmm. I think that's the expectation. I think it would be a failure if we don't make to the conference finals, which is such a cool thing to say as a Knicks fan.
It is. Yeah.
God, it's all happened so fast. I mean, I look at all the teams last year and like a healthy version of us, I think we could beat all of them. I don't think there's like the Nuggets were supposed to be these world beaters and they just lost, right? And they lost KCP and Jamal Murray was kind of buns. So like the Celtics are now looking like world beaters, but they weren't 2 years ago. Like I have no reason to believe it can't be us.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I won't say that's not fair.
I mean, at some point, you guys are top 4 team. Like, shit falls your way, might be holding the Larry OB.
Yep. The Sixers they got a nice squad. I still like I feel in my gut that like Embiid is a loser and like he loses in the championship. Or sorry, he loses in the playoffs often for a reason. And he racks up points in fantasy basketball often for a reason. And I think those two things are very different. You'd think that if you looked at fantasy that Joel Embiid is the best player in the league and Jalen Brunson is kind of average, but who would you guys? I mean, a lot of people might say they want Jalen Brunson on their playoff team more than Embiid.
I'm going to keep it a buck with you, Mark. If Embiid was healthy, I will take Embiid 10 times out of 10.
But I mean, I agree. But if Embiid is healthy, I'd consider him a top 2 player in the NBA. Like Embiid healthy.
That's the if.
Embiid healthy last year averaged 35 points per game on 40% from 55% from the field. Like
it's a whole lot of whistle, and the whistle cuts back a little bit in the playoffs. And Mr. Boney, I went up to Wells Fargo Arena in Philadelphia to watch a little Philly Knicks, and we won. And I watched. There was a good amount of time seeing in person where Joel Embiid was in a play, standing on the court complaining about not getting calls because he's soft, and I don't see that changing, and I don't think the best version of Philly was when they had Jimmy Butler, who's a motherfucker, to offset Joel, and they just got Paul George, who I think I could make him cry. He on the court. Like, I don't think Paul George is a killer, and I think since going to I think they needed a killer, and they got Paul George. I love Paul George. He's also a little bit older too. I don't think it's gonna happen.
You don't think they have a killer in Tyrese Maxey?
Tyrese is nice.
Tyrese is nice. Well, with that, is there any last points you guys want to make before we head out? We just did a good hour and change on Karl-Anthony Towns trade. Just for the viewers' sake, we're actually going to get a Minnesota perspective potentially up in here at some point here. So that'll be kind of fun. That's a little teaser.
I'm very interested to see what that's going to be about.
Yeah, I don't know if that pod's going to. I feel bad. Like I'm about to bash this trade.
You're gonna go on that. You're gonna go on that pod with whatever Timberwolves fan. You're gonna be like, I do see why Minnesota's doing that.
I might have to just to save face a little bit. We'll see. I might have to play it smart, or else we might lose another potential guest. We'll see. But yeah, like thanks for coming on, Mark. As per usual, have to do it again. Any last points anyone wants to make before we head out? Mark, Anthony,
go Knicks, baby.
No, that's all we got, boys. We got 19 days until the regular season. Let's go. Woo. That'll be hype. And it's Knicks Celtics. I mean, what a treat. But
doesn't get better than that.
All I'll say is the NBA is better when the Knicks are good, and thank goodness that the Knicks are good. So, hey, thank you guys. Keep watching. We're gonna have a lot of stuff coming down the pipeline for sure. We got the Knicks on our side right here. So we'll be back soon, probably next week at some point. But until then, as always, we'll be here chilling, spitting hoops. Holler at y'all.